Her small hands trembled violently as she clutched at the armored shoulder guard. Tears carved clean paths through the dirt and blood on her face, her voice shattering with each gasping word. "They're beating my sister and mother. Please, they'll kill them." The great throne room fell into absolute silence. The clang of armor ceased. War maps stopped rustling. Every battle-hardened warrior turned toward the source of the child's voice. But the man she had dared to interrupt was no ordinary ruler. He was Alpha King Torin Blackwood of the North, the one they called the Wolf of Winter. And what he did next would be spoken of for generations. Stay with me because what happens in the next moments will shake you to your core. Hello friends. Before we journey deeper into Torin's story, I invite you to subscribe and share in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence here matters. Now let's continue. It was a bitter winter evening in the Blackwood Kingdom, the year 1458. The ancient stone throne room blazed with torchlight, casting dancing shadows across weathered walls that had witnessed centuries of bloodshed and conquest. War chiefs in fur-lined armor stood around a massive oak table, their voices low and measured as they discussed border conflicts and treaty violations. This was no ordinary gathering. This was the Alpha King's War Council, where the fate of thousands was decided with cold strategic precision. Every commander knew the rules. Speak only when addressed, challenge only with evidence, and never, absolutely never, interrupt the Alpha King during strategic planning. Alpha King Torin Blackwood sat at the head of the war table, a man whose very presence commanded instant obedience and primal fear. At 36, he had conquered 3 rival kingdoms and unified the northern territories through sheer martial dominance and ruthless tactical brilliance. His amber eyes, wolf eyes, people whispered, missed nothing, tracking every movement in the room with predatory awareness. Tribal tattoos snaked down his muscular arms, each mark representing a battle won, an enemy defeated, a territory claimed. The heavy fur cloak draped across his shoulders and the battle-scarred armor spoke of a man forged in violence and tempered by loss. His word was absolute law, and tonight, like every council session for the past decade, he was methodically planning his kingdom's military strategy. The discussion flowed in practiced rhythms. Troop movements were analyzed, supply lines were evaluated, potential threats were assessed with surgical precision. This was how Torin operated, calculated, emotionless, never allowing sentiment to cloud tactical judgment. He had survived longer than any Alpha King in recorded history because he understood one fundamental truth. Emotion was weakness, attachment was vulnerability, and vulnerability got you killed. He had learned this lesson in blood and ash, and he would never forget it. But then it happened, the moment that would crack the fortress Torin had built around his frozen heart for 10 agonizing years. The massive iron-bound doors of the throne room burst open with such explosive force that they slammed against the ancient stone walls. Every head whipped toward the entrance. Strategic discussions died mid-sentence. Hands instinctively moved toward sword hilts. The royal guards rushed forward, their faces pale with a mixture of panic and confusion. But before anyone could intercept the intruder, every man in that chamber saw what had caused the unprecedented disruption. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, stood trembling in the doorway backlit by the corridor torches. Her simple woolen dress was torn and muddied, streaked with fresh blood that clearly wasn't her own. Her blonde hair hung in wild, tangled knots around a face streaked with tears, grime, and desperate terror. Her bare feet were cut and bleeding from running across frozen cobblestones. She looked like she had sprinted through the very gates of death itself to reach this place. Her small chest heaved with exhausted, gasping breaths, her whole body shaking with cold and fear and something else, desperate, unwavering determination. The child's brown eyes swept across the assembled warriors desperately, searching for something, someone, anyone who possessed the power to help her. The war council stared back in stunned, uncomfortable silence. Some of the hardened commanders looked away, unwilling to acknowledge the intrusion. Others muttered among themselves, annoyed that their crucial strategic meeting had been interrupted by what appeared to be some common street child. Several advisors whispered urgently that the guards should remove her immediately. Such disrespect to the Alpha King demanded severe punishment. But the little girl wasn't looking for sympathy or handouts. She was looking for power, raw, absolute, unmistakable power. Her desperate gaze locked onto Torin Blackwood's position at the head of the war table, and something in those innocent, terrified brown eyes recognized authority when she saw it. Perhaps it was the way every warrior in the room unconsciously deferred to him, turning slightly in his direction, awaiting his command. Perhaps it was the ornate armor that marked him as someone far above the others, or the ancient crown resting on the table beside his gauntlet hand. Or perhaps, just perhaps, it was something deeper, more primal. A child's instinct recognizing the one person in that entire room who possessed the actual power to do something. Without hesitation, without fear of the consequences, she ran straight toward him. The throne room held its collective breath. Torin's elite bodyguards, the king's fangs, tensed immediately, hands moving with practiced speed toward their weapons. This was absolutely unprecedented. No one approached Alpha King Torin Blackwood uninvited. Especially not like this, especially not during a closed war council. The penalty for such disrespect was swift and brutal. Several guards moved to intercept, ready to drag the child away and deliver appropriate punishment. But before anyone could act, the little girl reached Torin's position and grabbed his fur cloak with both small hands. Her tiny fingers clutched the expensive wolf pelt as if it were the only thing keeping her from drowning in despair. The blood on her hands, her sister's blood, her mother's blood, stained the pristine white fur. Her face turned upward, those brown eyes, wide with desperation, bright with tears, burning with hope, locked directly onto the most feared man in the northern kingdoms. And then she spoke the words that would echo through Torin Blackwood's mind for the rest of his life, the words that would change the course of his kingdom's history. "They're beating my sister and mother. Lord Vexus's men, they're going to kill them. My father died for you, Alpha King. Please, please, you have to save them." The silence that followed was absolutely deafening. You could have heard a single snowflake land in that throne room. Every eye fixed on Torin Blackwood, waiting with bated breath to see how the notorious Wolf of Winter would handle this shocking, unprecedented situation. His reputation had been built on absolute ruthlessness. A man untouchable by sentiment, unmoved by pleading, who showed mercy to absolutely no one. Those who interrupted his counsels were executed. Those who touched him uninvited lost their hands. Those who demanded anything from him learned the true meaning of suffering. Torin looked down at the child clinging to his cloak. Her face was turned upward toward his, dirt-streaked and blood-stained, those brown eyes impossibly wide with a combination of desperation and fragile, trembling hope. In that single frozen moment, something shifted deep inside the hardened Alpha King's chest, something he hadn't felt in a full decade. A crack appeared in walls he had reinforced with violence and isolation. A fissure running through the fortress of ice he had built around what remained of his shattered heart. This little girl, she was the exact same age as Sarah had been the last time he saw his daughter alive. The memory hit him like a war hammer to the chest, so powerful and unexpected that for a heartbeat he couldn't breathe. Brown eyes, blonde hair, 7 years old. The same desperate courage in the face of overwhelming terror. The same fragile trust that someone somewhere might actually help. 10 years ago, Torin Blackwood was a different man entirely. At 26, he was already a proven warrior and respected alpha, but he ruled with firm justice tempered by genuine compassion. He had a mate, Lyanna, beautiful and wise, who balanced his warrior's instincts with diplomatic grace. And he had a daughter, Sarah, a fearless 7-year-old girl with her father's amber eyes and her mother's gentle smile, who believed her papa could protect her from anything in the world. Sarah had been wrong about that, and Torin had failed her in the most devastating way possible. But to truly understand why this blood-stained child's plea would shatter the Wolf of Winter's frozen heart and change everything, you need to know about the tragedy that created the monster ruling the northern kingdoms, and the debt of honor that would force him to act. As Torin's warriors thundered through the cobblestone streets toward the Bennett cottage, their Alpha King rode at the front, his mind pulled inexorably backward through 10 years of carefully buried memories. The small weight of Arya, he'd learned her name during the frantic preparations, pressed against his chest where she sat in front of him on his war horse, wrapped in his fur cloak. She hadn't let go of his armor since leaving the throne room. Her silence was worse than her tears had been. The rhythm of hoofbeats became a drumbeat counting backward through time, each strike against stone carrying Torin further into the past he'd spent a decade trying to forget. 10 years ago, the Blackwood Kingdom knew a different Alpha King. Torin Blackwood at 26 was already a formidable warrior. He'd earned his position through strength and tactical brilliance, but he ruled with justice tempered by mercy. His people didn't just fear him. They genuinely respected him, even loved him. He was firm but fair, strong but not cruel, a leader who understood that true power came from loyalty earned, not just terror imposed. He had everything a man could want. Lyanna, his mate, was the daughter of a rival alpha he'd defeated in honorable combat. Their union had brought peace between two warring territories. She was beautiful, yes, but more importantly she was wise. A skilled diplomat who could navigate political complexities Torin had no patience for. She balanced his warrior's instincts with strategic thinking, his intensity with calm reason. Together they were building something unprecedented. A kingdom united not just through conquest but through genuine cooperation. And then there was Sarah. Torin's hands tightened on the reins as her face materialized in his memory with painful clarity. 7 years old, with golden blonde hair that caught the sunlight and amber eyes exactly like his own. Sarah had been fearless in the way only children who feel completely safe can be. Climbing trees she had no business climbing, challenging the training warriors to sparring matches with wooden swords, demanding bedtime stories about her papa's greatest battles and then arguing about his tactical decisions. She'd been the light in a world that constantly threatened darkness. The one pure, perfect thing in Torin's life that made all the violence and political maneuvering worthwhile. Every brutal decision, every difficult compromise, every dangerous gambit. He justified it all with the knowledge that he was building a safer, stronger kingdom for Sarah to inherit. He'd failed her so completely it still took his breath away. The memory sharpened with excruciating detail. It had been early spring, the kind of deceptively beautiful day where winter's last grip was finally releasing. Torin had been leading his warriors on what should have been a routine patrol of the northern border. Reports of raiders from the Crimson Claw pack testing their defenses. Standard procedure. He'd expected to be gone 3 days at most. The raid had been deliberately orchestrated to draw him away. Torin understood that now, though the realization had come far too late. The Crimson Claw weren't testing borders. They were creating a diversion. A masterfully executed tactical maneuver designed to remove the Alpha King from his seat of power at precisely the right moment. While Torin chased shadows in the northern mountains, the real attack came from within. Lyanna and Sarah had been in the palace's private gardens, supposedly under heavy guard. It was Sarah's favorite place. A walled sanctuary filled with flowering trees and stone fountains where she could play freely. Lyanna often spent afternoons there with their daughter, reading or simply enjoying the peace. The guards were Torin's own men, warriors he'd personally selected and trusted implicitly. But one of them, just one, had been a Crimson Claw spy, carefully planted months earlier, waiting for exactly this opportunity. The attack was swift and surgical. The traitor guard disabled his companions, then opened a hidden gate. Crimson Claw assassins poured into the garden like a dark flood. They came for Sarah specifically, not to ransom her but to kill her. To destroy the one thing that could break the unbreakable Alpha King. Lyanna had fought like a cornered wolf protecting her cub. The reports Torin received later, reports he'd extracted through methods that still haunted him, described how his mate had killed 3 assassins with nothing but a decorative garden blade before they finally brought her down. She'd positioned herself between the attackers and Sarah, buying precious seconds with her own body. Sarah had run. His brave, clever little girl had actually made it out of the garden, into the palace corridors, screaming for help. She'd almost reached the main hall where loyal guards were stationed. Almost. The assassins caught her just steps from safety. Torin had returned to find his palace in chaos, his wife dead in the garden she'd loved, and his daughter's small body laid out in the throne room as a message. The Crimson Claw had left their symbol carved into the stone beside her. A final insult, a declaration of their victory. The wolf inside Torin, the primal alpha essence that connected him to ancient power, had gone completely, utterly silent. For the first time in his life he couldn't feel that fundamental part of himself. The bond had shattered along with everything else. What emerged from the grief wasn't a man anymore. It was something colder, harder, infinitely more dangerous. Torin Blackwood died in that throne room alongside his daughter. The creature that rose from those ashes became known as the Wolf of Winter. He'd spent 2 years hunting the Crimson Claw pack. Not quickly, Torin had no interest in swift justice. He dismantled them piece by piece, person by person, making sure each one understood exactly why they were dying. He tracked down every member, every ally, every distant relation. The Crimson Claw pack had numbered over 200 strong. Torin reduced them to absolute extinction. But vengeance, he discovered, was ash in the mouth. Killing everyone responsible didn't bring Lyanna back. Didn't return Sarah's laughter to his halls. Didn't heal the wound that had torn his soul in half. It only left him hollow, empty, with nothing but the kingdom he'd built and no one to build it for. So Torin had made a vow over Sarah's grave, spoken to the stone that marked where he'd buried his heart. Never again. Never care. Never allow attachment. Never give his enemies another vulnerability to exploit. Sentiment was the weakness that had killed his family. Emotion was the blade that had carved out his insides. For 10 years he'd kept that vow perfectly. He ruled with absolute efficiency and zero compassion. Made no friends, took no lovers, formed no bonds. The Wolf of Winter needed nothing and no one. It was safer that way. Safer for everyone. Until tonight. Until brown eyes and blonde hair and a desperate 7-year-old's plea shattered a decade of careful isolation. Arya shifted against his chest, pulling Torin sharply back to the present. The child whimpered something unintelligible, and his arm tightened protectively around her small frame without conscious thought. His wolf, silent for 10 years, stirred with sudden, fierce intensity. Protect. The instinct was overwhelming, primal, undeniable. And then another memory surfaced, this one more recent but equally painful. 3 years ago. A brutal skirmish on the eastern border. Torin had been leading a defensive action against territory raiders when the ambush occurred. An enemy archer hidden in the trees drew a bead on Torin's exposed back. The Alpha King would have died, arrow through the spine, instant death, but Captain Marcus Bennett had seen the danger. Marcus hadn't hesitated, hadn't calculated odds or considered personal safety. He'd simply thrown himself between his king and the arrow, taking the shaft meant for Torin directly through his chest. Torin had caught him as he fell, dragged him behind cover, tried desperately to stop the bleeding. But the arrow had pierced lung and heart. Marcus was drowning in his own blood, dying in his king's arms, and there was nothing Torin could do to save him. "Promise me," Marcus had gasped, bloody foam on his lips. His hand had clutched Torin's armor with desperate strength. "My daughters, I can't alone. Promise me, protect them, if anything." "You'll tell them yourself," Torin had insisted, even knowing it was a lie. "Stay with me, Marcus. That's an order." But Marcus was already fading. "Promise. King, please." "I promise," Torin had sworn, meaning it in that moment. "I give you my word. Your family will be protected." Marcus Bennett had died with those words, a smile of relief on his face despite the agony. Torin had honored him with a hero's burial, ensured his widow received full military benefits, personally delivered the news to Mira Bennett. Then he'd returned to his cold throne and his colder routine, and gradually, inevitably, forgotten the promise entirely. There were always more battles, more crises, more demands on an Alpha King's attention. Marcus's sacrifice became just another casualty in an endless war. His promise became just another half-remembered vow made to a dying soldier. Until tonight. Until that dying soldier's youngest daughter grabbed his cloak and forced him to remember. The shame of it burned like acid in Torin's throat. He'd given his word as Alpha King, to a man who died saving his life. And then he'd simply forgotten. Moved on. Let Marcus Bennett's family struggle alone while Lord Vexus and his corruption crushed them beneath noble privilege. His wolf snarled with self-directed fury. Pack abandoned. Promise broken. Honor violated. The Blackwood Kingdom walls appeared ahead, torches blazing against the darkness. Torin urged his horse faster. His warriors matched his pace without question, their formation tight and battle-ready. They reached the city's edge and plunged into the narrow streets. The South Quarter, where the Bennett family lived, was one of the poorest districts. These streets Torin rarely visited, populated by the families of common soldiers and laborers who kept his kingdom running but rarely merited royal attention. The cottage came into view and Torin's enhanced hearing caught the sounds immediately. Men's rough laughter, a woman's scream, something heavy crashing against a wall. Arya went rigid in his arms. That's it. That's our house. Torin's cold fury ignited, not the hot, uncontrolled rage of his youth, but something far more dangerous. Ice-cold calculation mixed with absolute protective violence. His wolf surged forward, fully awake for the first time in a decade, demanding blood. He dismounted in a single fluid motion, passing Arya to his second-in-command. Keep her safe. Then Alpha King Torin Blackwood approached the cottage door, amber eyes blazing with an ancient, terrible power. His voice, when he spoke, carried the absolute authority of an alpha issuing a command that reality itself would obey. No one breaks a promise made to a dying warrior. Not even me. Torin's warriors formed up behind him with practiced precision, the king's fangs moving into assault positions without need for orders. They'd fought beside their alpha king for years, understood his methods, read his body language like a language written in violence. The tension radiating from Torin now told them everything they needed to know. Someone inside that cottage was about to learn the true meaning of royal fury. The cottage itself was humble almost to the point of poverty. Small, worn wooden walls patched multiple times, a roof that had seen better decades, shutters hanging slightly crooked. But despite its obvious age and disrepair, someone had maintained it with care. Flower boxes beneath the windows, though empty now in winter. A carefully swept front step. The pride of people who had little but refused to surrender their dignity. That dignity was being violated by the sounds coming from inside. Rough male voices, ugly with alcohol and cruelty. A woman's voice, older, commanding despite obvious pain, shouting defiance. A younger woman's scream, abruptly cut off. Furniture splintering. Glass shattering. Torin didn't knock. The door didn't just open when the Alpha King hit it. It exploded inward, torn completely off its hinges by a single devastating kick. The heavy wood crashed against the interior wall, the sound like a thunderclap in the small space. Torin stepped through the destroyed entrance, and the entire room seemed to shrink around his presence. The scene inside ignited something primal and murderous in Torin's chest. Lord Vexus, corpulent and sweating despite the winter cold, his expensive robes incongruous in the humble cottage, stood over a woman collapsed on the floor. Blood matted her dark hair where she'd been struck. Two of Vexus's enforcers held a younger woman between them, her dress torn, her face bruised, defiance burning in her eyes despite obvious terror. The cottage had been ransacked. Drawers pulled out and emptied, their meager contents scattered across the floor. Furniture overturned. A simple shelf of books knocked over, precious volumes trampled. These weren't men searching for something. They were destroying everything these women owned for the sheer pleasure of destruction. Vexus froze mid-gloat, the words dying in his throat as he registered who had just demolished his way into the cottage. His face drained of color so quickly Torin could track the blood fleeing from his features. The two enforcers holding the younger woman released her immediately, hands moving instinctively toward weapons they suddenly realized would be utterly useless. The other four men scattered around the cottage, all armed, all dangerous in their own right, stood paralyzed by the sight that filled the doorway. Alpha King Torin Blackwood, backlit by torchlight from the street, his fur cloak making him appear massive and inhuman, his amber eyes literally glowing with barely contained wolf rage. When Torin spoke, his voice carried the dangerous calm of a predator that had already decided its prey was dead, The question was only how much it would suffer first. Vexus. Just the name. Just one word. But it contained universes of promised violence. Lord Vexus's survival instincts warred with his arrogance. For a heartbeat terror one, he actually took a step backward, away from the woman he'd been looming over. Then his noble pride reasserted itself, the entitled fury of a man accustomed to privilege and protection. Alpha King. Vexus attempted an indignant tone, but his voice cracked. This is a private matter of debt collection. These women owe substantial. Explain to me, Torin interrupted, his tone conversational in a way that made every warrior present tense for violence. Why you're in the home of Captain Marcus Bennett's widow. A man who died serving this kingdom. A hero whose family is under royal protection. Vexus's face went from pale to ashen. I wasn't aware. The records showed only. You're lying. Torin took a single step forward. Just one. But the movement carried such focused threat that 3 of Vexus's men actually drew their weapons in panic. You've been systematically targeting the families of fallen warriors for years. Falsifying debt records. Seizing property. Selling vulnerable women and children to settle imaginary obligations. Did you truly believe I wouldn't discover this? The woman on the floor, Mira, Torin realized, Marcus's widow, stirred, trying to push herself upright. Blood ran down the side of her face from a nasty gash above her temple. She looked up at Torin with eyes that struggled to focus, confusion and recognition warring in her concussed gaze. I know you, she whispered, the words slurred. The battlefield, the arrow. Torin's attention snapped to her and something clenched in his chest. He did remember now, not her face, he'd been dying at the time, but the competent hands that had saved his life. The calm voice talking him through the pain. The field healer who'd extracted an arrow from his chest and somehow kept him alive long enough for proper medical treatment. This was the woman Marcus Bennett had loved. The woman Torin had promised to protect. And she was bleeding on her own floor because Torin had forgotten, had allowed corruption to flourish unchecked in his own kingdom. The younger woman, Elena she had to be, took advantage of the distraction. With the enforcer's attention on Torin, she wrenched free of their loosened grip and dove for the corner of the cottage. Her hands scrabbled at a floorboard that appeared identical to all the others, but she pried it up with the ease of long practice. You want evidence? Elena's voice shook with fury and terror combined, but her hands were steady as she pulled out a leather-bound ledger. Here's your evidence, Alpha King. Every property Vexus has stolen. Every family he's destroyed. Every bribe he's paid to officials who should have stopped him. It's all here. Names, dates, amounts. 3 years of documentation. She thrust the ledger toward Torin with both hands, and he saw the intelligence burning behind her fear. This young woman hadn't just survived Vexus's predation. She'd been building a case against him, gathering proof, waiting for someone who might actually listen. Torin took the ledger, his eyes never leaving Vexus's face. He didn't need to open it to know what it contained. Elena Bennett's desperate courage told him everything. You documented everything, Torin said to Elena, something like respect in his voice. Someone had to. Elena's voice gained strength. My father died serving you. My mother saved your life. We deserved better than this. Everyone Vexus destroyed deserved better. Vexus finally found his voice, desperation making him stupid. Those documents are forgeries. The word of a common seamstress against a lord of the realm? You can't seriously. I can do anything I want. Torin's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than a shout. I'm the Alpha King. But let's discuss law since you're suddenly so concerned with it. He handed the ledger to one of his warriors without looking away from Vexus. By the ancient laws of the Blackwood Kingdom, any nobleman who exploits the family of a fallen warrior forfeits all rights and protections. Do you know what the traditional punishment is, Vexus? The lord's legs actually buckled slightly. Alpha King, please, I can explain. The punishment, Torin continued relentlessly, is complete and immediate stripping of title, lands, and wealth. Everything you own becomes property of the crown, to be redistributed to your victims. You become nothing. Less than nothing. A man without name, without home, without protection of law. You can't. Vexus's voice rose to a panicked shriek. I have rights. I demand a formal trial. The noble houses will never accept. Torin moved. One moment he was near the doorway. The next he was directly in front of Vexus, moving with a speed that shouldn't be possible for a man his size. His hand shot out and grabbed Vexus by the throat, lifting the corpulent lord partially off his feet. You raised your hand. Torin's voice was barely human now, his wolf bleeding through every word, against the family of Captain Marcus Bennett. A man who died saving my life. You tormented a child whose father served me with honor. You beat a woman who holds my life debt. Vexus made choking sounds, his face turning purple. There is no law in my kingdom that protects you from me. Torin's amber eyes blazed. There is no trial needed when I witnessed your crimes with my own eyes. There is no defense for what you've done. He released Vexus, letting the man collapse to the floor in a gasping heap. By my authority as Alpha King, I strip you of your title. Lord Vexus no longer exists. You are simply Vexus now, a criminal who will spend the rest of his miserable life in my dungeons contemplating his crimes. Vexus, desperate and cornered, made the stupidest decision of his life. His hand darted inside his robes and emerged with a jeweled dagger, more ornamental than functional but deadly enough. With a scream of rage and terror combined, he lunged at Torin. The Alpha King didn't even blink. His hand caught Vexus's wrist mid-strike, the grip crushing. Bones cracked audibly. Vexus's scream rose to a shriek. The dagger clattered to the floor. You just assaulted the Alpha King, Torin said conversationally while Vexus writhed in his grip. In front of witnesses. That simplifies things considerably. He looked at his warriors. Take him. Take all of them. Chains for Vexus, he's earned special accommodations. The enforcers go to the regular cells to await trial. The king's fangs moved with efficient brutality. Within moments, Vexus and his men were subdued, bound, and being dragged toward the door. Vexus was sobbing now, all arrogance fled, begging for mercy that would never come. Only when the criminals were removed did Torin turn his full attention to the women. Elena stood protectively over her mother, one hand still clutching a heavy candlestick she'd grabbed as a weapon. She watched Torin with wary eyes, grateful but not trusting, intelligent enough to wonder what price an Alpha King's help might carry. Torin knelt beside Mira, his movements careful and unthreatening. Up close he could see she was fading in and out of consciousness, the head wound serious. Mira Bennett, he said gently. I owe you my life. And I owe your husband, your late husband, a debt of honor I failed to repay. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I forgot. I'm sorry I let this happen to you. Myra's eyes focused on him with difficulty, but recognition flared. The arrow. I remember. You promised Marcus. I did. And I'm keeping that promise now. You and your daughters are under my personal protection. You'll be brought to the palace, to the royal healers. Everything Vexus took from you will be restored. Everything and more. Elena's voice cut in, sharp with suspicion despite her fear. Why would you do this? What do you want from us? Torin stood, met her challenging gaze directly. Your father saved my life on the battlefield. Your mother saved my life before that. I made a vow to protect you and I failed. That ends tonight. I want nothing from you except the chance to finally keep my word. He gestured to his warriors. Get the healers here immediately. Prepare transport to the palace. And find young Arya, she should be with her family. As his men moved to obey, Torin looked around the ransacked cottage, at the destroyed remnants of a family trying to survive despite impossible odds. At a child's drawings on the wall, Arya's artwork showing her family together, happy, whole. Something clenched painfully in his chest, a feeling he'd thought dead and buried for a decade. Purpose. Not the cold drive to conquer or rule, but something warmer, more human. The desire to protect, to help, to make something right. His wolf stirred again, stronger this time. But these were pack now, whether they knew it or not. And Torin Blackwood protected his pack. Get them to safety, he ordered, his voice carrying absolute authority. And find the little girl. Arya should be with her family when they wake up in the palace. 3 days after the rescue, dawn light filtered through the tall windows of the palace's eastern healing wing, painting everything in soft gold. The room itself was a study in contrasts. Ancient stone walls softened by tapestries depicting the kingdom's history, functional medical equipment arranged beside luxury furnishings that most common folk would never see in their entire lives. Mira Bennett lay in a bed larger than her entire cottage bedroom had been, her head bandaged professionally, her color slowly returning after days of critical care. Elena sat in a chair she'd barely left since their arrival, keeping vigil. She'd refused the servants' offers of a proper bedroom, insisted on staying within sight of her mother at all times. Trust, she'd learned through brutal experience, was a luxury they couldn't afford. Even here in the palace, especially here in the palace. Powerful men always wanted something. Always. She was determined to discover what price the Alpha King would eventually demand for his help. The youngest Bennett, however, had no such reservations. Arya had transformed the healing wing into her personal domain with the fearless confidence only a 7-year-old could muster. The palace servants found her simultaneously charming and bewildering. This small child who showed absolutely no intimidation in the presence of ancient power and wealth. She'd already explored half the palace, asked approximately 900 questions about everything from the kitchen operations to the throne room's architectural history, and somehow befriended the stern head housekeeper who hadn't smiled in living memory. The scary lady with the keys gave me candied ginger, Arya had announced proudly that morning, using her description for the head housekeeper. She said I remind her of someone brave. Do you think she means Papa? Papa was brave. Elena had pulled her sister close, fighting tears. Yes, sweetling. Papa was very brave. And so are you. Now mid-morning, Arya was helping the healers reorganize their herb cabinet, which mostly meant asking what each plant did and creating an elaborate naming system that made sense only to her. The head healer, a stern woman who'd served 3 Alpha Kings, found herself patiently explaining medicinal properties to a child who listened with intense focus before declaring that moon petal was a much better name than its proper botanical designation. The sound of heavy boots in the corridor silenced the room instantly. Elena's hand moved to the knife she'd hidden under her chair's cushion, a weapon she'd taken from the palace armory when no one was looking. She might be a guest here, but she refused to be defenseless. Alpha King Torin Blackwood entered the healing wing, and the space seemed to shrink around him. He was dressed less formally than during the throne room encounter. No crown, simpler armor, but his presence remained overwhelming. His amber eyes swept the room in automatic assessment. Mira sleeping peacefully, Elena tense and watchful, Arya currently upside down looking under a cabinet for something the healers had lost. This was his 3rd daily visit. The pattern was becoming routine. Morning check on their recovery, resource allocation, then back to kingdom business. Professional. Distant. Exactly what Elena expected from a ruler fulfilling an obligation. But today something was different. Today Arya spotted him. Mr. King. She scrambled upright with zero regard for dignity, her dress covered in dust from her floor exploration. Before anyone could stop her, before Elena could warn her about proper protocol, before the healers could remind her about royal etiquette, Arya ran straight to Torin and grabbed his hand. The Alpha King froze. Every servant in the room held their breath. No one touched the Alpha King uninvited. No one. You came back. Arya beamed up at him with uncomplicated joy. You promised you would and you did. Elena said important people don't keep promises to unimportant people, but I said you were different and I was right. Elena wanted to melt into the floor. Torin's expression was unreadable, those amber eyes fixed on the small hand clutching his much larger one. Then slowly, carefully the Alpha King knelt, bringing himself to Arya's eye level, the same gesture he'd made in the throne room. When he spoke, his voice carried none of its usual commanding edge. I always keep my promises, little one. Always. And you're not unimportant. You're very important. Really. Arya's eyes went wide. But Elena says we're just common people. That nobles and kings don't care about people like us. Torin's jaw tightened, and he glanced at Elena with something that might have been understanding. Your sister is wise to be cautious. But I give you my word, I care very much what happens to you and your family. Because you owed Papa? Arya asked with a child's directness. Yes. And because... Torin hesitated, clearly struggling with words. Because you were brave enough to ask for help when you needed it. That takes courage most adults don't have. Arya considered this seriously, then made a decision that would become a defining moment. She stepped forward and hugged the Alpha King, just wrapped her small arms around his armored torso and squeezed. The room's collective shock was palpable. Elena actually half rose from her chair, uncertain whether to pull Arya away or prepare to defend her sister from whatever punishment this breach of protocol would bring. But Torin didn't push the child away. Didn't stiffen or call for guards or deliver a lecture on proper behavior. Instead, after a moment of visible internal struggle, one of his large hands settled gently on Arya's blonde hair. Something in his expression cracked. Just briefly, just enough for Elena to glimpse raw pain underneath the cold exterior. Thank you for saving Mama and Elena, Arya said into his armor. I was so scared. But you came just like you promised. When Arya finally released him and scampered back to her herb cabinet project, Torin remained kneeling for a moment, looking almost lost. Then he stood, his expression carefully neutral once more, but Elena had seen the crack in his armor. Had witnessed something human beneath the legendary ruthlessness. It made her more nervous, not less. Human meant unpredictable. Human meant emotions and motivations she couldn't easily read or counter. A groan from the bed drew everyone's attention. Mira was waking, her eyes fluttering open with more clarity than she'd shown since the attack. The head healer moved immediately to check her vital signs, making satisfied sounds. Mira Bennett. Torin approached the bed, his voice formal but not cold. How do you feel? Myra's eyes focused on him and recognition bloomed immediately, clearer now without the concussion clouding her mind. Alpha King Torin. I remember you. The battlefield. The arrow through your chest near the left lung. You shouldn't have survived that wound. I didn't almost. Torin's expression held genuine respect. You saved my life. I never properly thanked you. I was just doing my duty. Mira tried to sit up, winced at the pain, but waved away the healer's attempts to keep her lying down. How long have I been unconscious? 3 days. You had a serious head wound and significant blood loss. But the healers say you'll recover fully. Torin paused. I'm sorry I failed to protect you. Marcus made me promise if anything happened to him, that I would watch over his family. I gave my word. And then I forgot. I let you struggle alone while corruption crushed you. That ends now. Mira studied him with a healer's assessing gaze, seeing beneath surfaces. You're carrying a lot of guilt, Alpha King. More than just a forgotten promise. I can see it in your eyes. The observation was so accurate, so unexpected that Torin actually flinched. Elena watched this exchange with growing fascination. Her mother had always possessed an uncanny ability to read people, to see past facades to the truth beneath. It had made her an excellent healer. Understanding pain went beyond just treating physical wounds. I lost someone, Torin admitted quietly. Lost my whole family, actually. 10 years ago. I vowed never to care about anyone again, never to let anyone close. Safer that way. For everyone. But isolation isn't safety, Mira said gently. It's just slow death in a different form. I know. After Marcus died, I tried to shut down too. But I had my daughters. They forced me to keep living, keep feeling, keep hoping. Even when it hurt. Marcus was a good man. A hero. Torin's voice carried genuine grief. He saved my life. Threw himself between me and an arrow without hesitation. His last words were asking me to protect you. Tears streamed down Myra's face, but she smiled through them. That sounds like Marcus. Always protecting others before himself. He loved you, you know. Believed in you completely. Said you were the first Alpha King in generations who truly cared about the common soldiers. The words hit Torin visibly. He looked away, jaw working as he processed emotions he'd spent a decade suppressing. Elena couldn't stay silent anymore. What happens to us now? Her voice was harder than she intended, sharpened by suspicion and self-protection. You've rescued us, brought us to the palace, promised protection. But nothing's free. What do you want from us, Alpha King? What's the price for your mercy? Torin turned to her, and Elena forced herself not to flinch under that amber gaze. To her surprise, he nodded slowly, as if he'd expected this question, maybe even respected it. Your distrust is wise, he said bluntly. You're right that powerful men usually want something. But I want nothing from you except the opportunity to keep the promise I made to your father. You'll have your property returned, all of it, plus additional estates seized from Vexus. You'll have kingdom support, financial security, complete freedom to live as you choose. Just like that. Elena's voice dripped skepticism. Out of the goodness of your heart? Out of a debt of honor? Torin's expression hardened slightly. Your father saved my life. Your mother saved my life. I owe your family everything. And more practically, he pulled the leather ledger Elena had given him from inside his cloak. You've given me something invaluable. Evidence of corruption that goes far deeper than Vexus. Elena's attention sharpened. You've read it. Every page. The Silver Circle conspiracy, 17 noble houses involved in systematic exploitation. And worse, your documentation includes financial records that point to someone in my own palace coordinating everything. Someone I trusted. His voice went cold as winter ice. Chancellor Dorian. The name meant nothing to Elena, but Mira gasped. The Chancellor? But he's been your chief advisor for years. 10 years, actually. Since right after my family died. He helped me rebuild, reorganize, strengthen the kingdom. Torin's hands clenched the ledger. Or so I thought. Apparently, he was building his own power base, using the Silver Circle to consolidate wealth and position. Your records prove it conclusively. What will you do? Mira asked. Tribunal. Public trials for all involved. Complete exposure of the corruption followed by systematic justice. Torin looked at Elena. And I'm hoping you'll help. You've already proven yourself an excellent investigator. I need that skill. The kingdom needs it. Elena blinked, completely caught off guard. You want me to, what exactly? Work for me. Official position as the kingdom's first corruption investigator. Royal authority to audit any noble house, any official, anyone suspected of exploiting their position. You'd report directly to me, answer to no one else. I'm a seamstress, Elena said flatly. I have no training for. You exposed the greatest conspiracy in my kingdom's history using nothing but persistence and courage. You documented everything perfectly, built an irrefutable case, and had the bravery to present it when the opportunity came. Torin's expression was serious. That's not just training, Elena. That's natural talent. And more importantly, that's someone who cares enough to fight for justice even when it's dangerous. Elena looked at her mother, searching for guidance. Mira smiled gently. It's your choice, sweetling. But your father would be proud. Fighting corruption, protecting the vulnerable. That's what he believed in. Before Elena could respond, Arya appeared at Torin's side again, tugging his hand with the persistence of someone who'd already decided they were friends. Mr. King, do you have a family? The question was innocent, direct, devastating. The silence that followed was painful. Torin looked down at the small girl, and Elena saw the flash of absolute agony cross his face before he locked it down. I did, he said quietly. Once. A long time ago. What happened to them? Arya. Mira started to intervene, but Torin shook his head. It's all right. He knelt again, meeting Arya's curious gaze. They died. Bad people hurt them and I couldn't stop it. I couldn't save them. Arya processed this with a child's serious contemplation. Then she said with the simple wisdom that only children possess, then you know. You know why you have to help us. Because family is everything. And when you lose family, you understand why protecting other people's families matters so much. The words hit Torin like a physical blow. Elena saw him actually sway slightly, saw his carefully constructed walls crack even further. His hand came up to touch Arya's cheek with a gentleness that seemed impossible from the feared wolf of winter. "Yes," he whispered. "Yes, you're exactly right, little one. Family is everything." And in that moment, watching the most powerful man in the kingdom kneel before her 7-year-old sister with tears threatening in his ancient eyes, Elena made her decision. "I'll do it," she said clearly. "I'll be your investigator. On one condition." Torin looked up at her, waiting. "We stay together. All of us. Whatever happens, wherever we go, we stay together as a family. That's not negotiable." A smile ghosted across Torin's face, the first genuine smile Elena had seen from him. "Agreed. You'll have quarters in the palace, all 3 of you. Together. Under my personal protection." As if summoned by the moment, servants appeared with food and fresh bandages. The morning routine continued, but something fundamental had shifted. The Bennett family was no longer just refugees being sheltered out of obligation. They were becoming something else entirely. Something neither Elena nor Torin quite had words for yet. But Arya, with a child's clarity, had already figured it out. As Torin stood to leave, she called after him, "Mr. King? We're packed now, right? Like wolves." Torin stopped, his entire body going still. The word resonated with his wolf, the primal alpha essence he'd suppressed for a decade. Recognition. Acceptance. Bond. "Yes," he said, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer fully contain. "Yes, Arya. We're packed now." And for the first time in 10 years, the Wolf of Winter's heart remembered how to beat for someone other than himself. 1 week after the Bennett family's rescue, the great throne room of Blackwood Palace had been transformed into something unprecedented in the kingdom's long history. A court of public justice where nobles would answer for crimes against common people. Hundreds packed the ancient hall. Noble houses summoned under penalty of treason. Common folk allowed entrance for the first time in decades. Merchants and soldiers and widows who'd suffered under the Silver Circle's corruption. Torin surveyed the assembly from his throne, reading the room with tactical precision. Fear from the guilty nobles. Hope from the common people. Confusion from those who genuinely didn't understand why they'd been summoned. And hovering near the throne's base, attempting to appear helpful while subtly controlling the proceedings, Chancellor Dorian, soon to be exposed as the architect of everything. The Chancellor was a study in deceptive competence. 60 years old, silver-haired, dignified bearing that inspired automatic trust. He'd served the kingdom for decades, survived multiple regime changes through apparent loyalty and administrative brilliance. Torin had relied on him completely after Lyanna and Sarah died, allowed Dorian to handle details while the grieving Alpha King focused only on military matters and territorial expansion. That trust, Torin now understood, had been weaponized against him. While he'd been drowning in grief and rage, Dorian had been systematically corrupting the kingdom from within. "Alpha King," Dorian approached with practiced deference, "perhaps we should begin with minor administrative corrections? Starting with the most serious accusations might cause unnecessary panic among." "We'll start with Lord Vexus," Torin interrupted, his voice carrying across the hall with absolute authority. "Bring the prisoner forward." Dorian's expression flickered, just briefly, just enough for someone watching closely to see calculation behind the concerned facade. "Of course, Alpha King. Though I should mention that Lord Vexus has requested formal legal representation, and under traditional protocols. He assaulted the crown. He has no rights." Torin's amber eyes locked onto Dorian's and something passed between them. A moment of recognition. Dorian realizing his king knew more than he'd revealed. Torin confirming his chancellor's guilt through that flash of panic. Guards dragged Vexus forward in chains. The formerly corpulent lord had lost considerable weight during his week in the dungeons, his expensive robes replaced by prisoners' rags. He looked broken, desperate, exactly the kind of weak link Torin needed. "Lord Vexus," Torin paused deliberately, "or simply Vexus now, as you no longer hold title or rank. You stand accused of systematic exploitation of war widows, falsification of debt records, illegal seizure of property, and assault on the families of fallen warriors. How do you answer?" Vexus's voice cracked. "Mercy, Alpha King. I was following established procedures, operating within legal frameworks that Chancellor Dorian created for you. Torin's words dropped like stones into still water. The room went silent. Isn't that correct? The legal frameworks, the falsified records, the protection from investigation, all coordinated through the Chancellor's office. Dorian stiffened almost imperceptibly. Alpha King, I must object to these baseless. Baseless. Elena Bennett's voice rang out clear and strong. She stepped forward from where she'd been positioned near the throne, Torin's new official investigator, dressed in formal kingdom colors. I have 3 years of documentation proving otherwise. She held up the leather ledger, and Torin watched several noble houses visibly pale. The guilty recognized their doom in that book. Elena read with devastating precision. Names, dates, properties seized, bribes paid. Each entry a dagger through the Silver Circle's conspiracy. And woven throughout, references to the Grey Architect, a coordinator who facilitated everything, whose movements and decisions matched Chancellor Dorian's schedule perfectly. The Grey Architect met with Lord Vexus every third Tuesday, Elena read. These meetings occurred in the Chancellor's private office. The Grey Architect approved all major property seizures and arranged official documentation. The Grey Architect. Enough. Dorian's composure finally cracked. This is absurd. A seamstress girl's fantasy, desperate accusations from someone who nearly died exposing your crimes. Torin stood, and the sheer presence of an Alpha King in full authority silenced the room. Elena Bennett risked everything to document the truth. While you, Dorian, my trusted advisor, betrayed me. Betrayed this kingdom. For what? Money? Power? Dorian's face transformed. The kindly advisor mask fell away, revealing cold ambition beneath. You were weak, Torin. Broken by sentiment, wallowing in grief, letting the kingdom stagnate. I made us strong. I built systems that actually worked while you played warrior king and mourned your dead family. The accusation hung in the air. Several nobles gasped at the sheer disrespect. But Torin remained eerily calm. You're right about one thing. I was broken. I let grief blind me to corruption festering in my own palace. Torin descended from the throne, each step measured. But I'm not broken anymore. And you made a critical miscalculation, Dorian. You assumed I'd stay weak forever. Dorian's hand moved to his robes. I've planned for this contingency. Guards loyal to me outnumber yours 3-1 in this room. You'll step down peacefully, announce your abdication or what? Torin's voice carried deadly amusement. You'll stage a coup in front of hundreds of witnesses? You'll murder your Alpha King publicly and expect to rule. I'll do what's necessary to save this kingdom from your weakness. Dorian gestured sharply, and 20 guards throughout the room drew weapons. Not attacking, just revealing their allegiance. Sentiment makes you vulnerable, Torin. Caring for those Bennett women proved it. The Wolf of Winter died the moment he let himself feel again. No. Torin's transformation was subtle but unmistakable. His eyes blazed brighter amber, his presence expanding to fill the space with alpha authority. The Wolf of Winter died the moment a 7-year-old girl made him remember what he was fighting for. What rose in his place is something you can't comprehend, Dorian. A protector, not just a destroyer. Dorian made his move. His loyal guards surged forward, weapons raised. But Torin had anticipated everything. The king's fangs erupted from their positions. Not 20 warriors but 50, carefully positioned throughout the crowd. The brief clash was brutal and one-sided. Dorian's mercenaries found themselves outnumbered, outfought, overwhelmed. Dorian himself drew a blade, an ornate sword that had hung decoratively in his office for years, now revealed as a genuine weapon. I won't let you undo everything I built. He attacked with surprising skill, clearly trained despite his administrative role. But he was fighting an Alpha King in his prime, a warrior who'd conquered kingdoms. Torin didn't even draw his weapon. He simply moved, faster than human wolf-enhanced reflexes making him seem to blur. One strike disarmed Dorian. A second sent him to his knees. Torin's hand closed around the Chancellor's throat, lifting him effortlessly. You built nothing, Torin's voice resonated with primal power. You parasitized my grief, exploited my people, corrupted my kingdom. Everything you touched turned to poison. He threw Dorian down before the throne, the impact cracking stone. The former chancellor tried to rise, failed, collapsed in a heap of expensive robes and broken ambition. Torin addressed the room, his voice carrying to every corner. Chancellor Dorian is guilty of treason, corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, and attempting to overthrow the crown. The 17 noble houses named in this ledger share his guilt. Effective immediately, all titles are stripped, all lands seized, all wealth confiscated. He turned to the common folk watching with wide eyes. Everything stolen will be returned to you. Every false debt is forgiven. Every family exploited will receive restitution from the guilty nobles' estates. The room erupted in shocked murmurs, but Torin raised his hand for silence. Furthermore, I established the Fallen Warriors Protection Act. Any family whose member died serving this kingdom will receive permanent kingdom support. No widow can be exploited for debts. No orphan can be seized as payment. No hero's legacy will be dishonored by vultures preying on those they protected. He looked directly at Elena, at Mira who sat in the gallery with Arya. Captain Marcus Bennett died saving my life. His family nearly suffered horribly because I forgot my oath to him. That ends now. This act ensures no other hero's family will ever be forgotten. Arya, unable to contain herself despite the formal setting, stood on her chair and called out, "Thank you for keeping your promise, Alpha King." The child's voice, pure and genuine, broke the tension. Spontaneous applause erupted from the common folk, unprecedented in a formal tribunal, but Torin didn't silence it. He let his people express their relief, their joy, their hope that perhaps their kingdom was changing for the better. When silence finally returned, Torin delivered his final judgment. "Dorian, you orchestrated this conspiracy for years, enriching yourself while good people suffered. You won't die. That would be mercy. You'll live in exile beyond our borders, stripped of everything, carrying nothing but the name of traitor. Perhaps wandering poverty will teach you what your victims endured." Dorian, broken and bleeding, managed one final sneer. "You'll fail, Torin. The wolf who feels is the wolf who dies. Your sentiment will destroy you." "Perhaps," Torin acknowledged. "But I'd rather die protecting something I love than live protecting nothing at all." Guards dragged Dorian away along with the captured conspirators. The tribunal continued for hours. Individual cases heard, evidence presented, justice dispensed. But the critical moment had passed. The silver circle was broken. The kingdom had witnessed their Alpha King choose justice over expedience, people over power. As the proceedings wound down, Elena approached the throne. "That was risky. Dorian's guards could have succeeded." "No," Torin said quietly. "I counted his forces weeks ago, replaced them systematically. Today was theater, giving him rope to hang himself publicly. You manipulated everything. It wasn't quite an accusation. I learned from the best. Dorian taught me that power requires careful planning." Torin smiled grimly. "I just used it for something better than exploitation." That evening, after the crowds dispersed and the palace quieted, Torin found himself in the Bennett family's quarters. Arya was supposed to be sleeping but had other ideas. Papa King. She'd started using the title naturally and Torin hadn't corrected her. "Did you win?" "Yes, little wolf. We won." "Good." Arya yawned, fighting sleep. "Bez pack protects pack. And we're pack now." Torin tucked the fur cloak around her, his own cloak which she'd claimed as hers. "Yes. We're pack now. Always." As Arya drifted off, Torin stood guard, watching over the family that had somehow become his reason to be more than just the Wolf of Winter. Outside, his kingdom was changing. Inside, his frozen heart continued its painful thaw. 6 weeks after the tribunal, spring arrived in the Blackwood Kingdom with unusual gentleness. Snow melted from the palace gardens, revealing earth ready for renewal. Throughout the realm, similar transformations were occurring, not just seasonal but fundamental shifts in how the kingdom functioned. The Fallen Warriors Protection Act had changed everything. Widows who'd been struggling suddenly found kingdom support. Orphans received education and training. Veterans' families gained legal protections that made exploitation impossible. The common people spoke of their Alpha King with something beyond fear now. Genuine loyalty, earned through justice rather than demanded through power. Elena Bennett stood in her new office, a tower room overlooking the capital, surrounded by documents requiring investigation. Her official title, First Corruption Investigator, came with surprising authority. Noble houses that once wouldn't acknowledge her existence now answered her summons nervously, knowing refusal meant the Alpha King's personal attention. He was good at this work. Better than good, exceptional. Her mind naturally found patterns in financial records, recognized inconsistencies in testimony, built cases with methodical precision. 3 minor nobles had already been stripped of lands for exploiting common folk. 2 corrupt tax collectors faced prison. The kingdom's administrative corruption was being systematically purged. Another audit request, her assistant, a sharp young man named Marcus, named after her father, handed her documents. The Northern Lumber Consortium. Possible price fixing and worker exploitation. Elena scanned the papers, her investigator's instincts immediately noting suspicious patterns. Schedule interviews with the workers first. Always start with those being exploited, they have the truth. As Marcus left, Elena allowed herself a moment of reflection. 2 months ago she'd been a seamstress barely surviving, protecting her family from predators like Vexus. Now she wielded power that made nobles nervous. The transformation still felt surreal. A knock interrupted her thoughts. Mira entered, carrying tea and wearing the formal robes of her own new position. Chief medical advisor to the royal household. Her head wound had healed completely, leaving only a faint scar hidden by her hair. "You're working too hard again," Mira chided gently, setting the tea on Elena's desk. "The Northern Consortium has existed for decades. Their corruption can wait until after lunch." "People are suffering while I take breaks," Elena countered, but she accepted the tea gratefully. People suffered for years while the corruption thrived unchecked. You can't fix everything immediately. Mira settled into a chair with practiced ease. She'd grown comfortable in the palace surprisingly quickly. "Besides, I just came from a council meeting about expanding medical training. The Alpha King approved my proposal for free healer education for common folk. We start enrolling students next month." Pride and warmth filled Elena's chest. Her mother had always been brilliant. Watching her skills finally receive proper recognition felt like justice. "Papa would be so proud of you." "Of both of us," Mira corrected. "And of Arya, who's currently teaching the stable master's daughter about proper horse care, despite being 7 and having known horses for exactly 6 weeks. Elena laughed despite herself. Arya had integrated into palace life with the fearless enthusiasm only a child could manage. She'd befriended servants and nobles alike, explored every corridor, asked questions that sometimes made pompous advisors splutter, and somehow become the palace's unofficial mascot. More remarkably, she'd wrapped the most feared man in the kingdom around her small finger. "How was the Alpha King this morning?" Elena asked carefully. She still struggled with reading Torin, still watched him warily for signs that his help came with hidden prices. Myra's expression softened. "Haunted as usual. But healing, I think. He's teaching Arya archery this afternoon. Something about her needing to know self-defense. But really, I think he just enjoys her company. It's strange seeing him with her." The Wolf of Winter playing teacher to a 7-year-old. Elena shook her head. "The court doesn't know what to make of it. The court is learning their Alpha King is more complex than his reputation suggested." Mira sipped her tea thoughtfully. "He carries so much pain, Elena. Losing his mate and daughter broke something fundamental in him. But Arya is helping him remember how to feel without the agony overwhelming him." Elena wanted to maintain her skepticism, her protective distance. But 6 weeks of observation had shown her truth she couldn't deny. Torin Blackwood genuinely cared about their family. Not as property or obligation but as something deeper. Something he clearly struggled to name or accept. In the palace training yard, that struggle was playing out in real time. Torin adjusted Arya's stance for the 10th time, his large hands gentle on her small shoulders. Feet shoulder-width apart. Elbow up. Draw to your cheek, not your chest. Arya concentrated fiercely, her face scrunched with determination. The training bow was sized for children, but she still struggled with the draw weight. Like this, Papa King? The title still hit Torin like a physical impact every time. Papa King. A child's combination of respect and affection that he had no defense against. Perfect. Now breathe out slowly and release. He stepped back, watching as Arya loosed the arrow. It flew wide of the target by several feet, but she'd maintained proper form. Excellent. Your technique is much better. I missed by a lot, Arya pouted. You maintained control through the whole shot. Accuracy comes with practice. Control comes first. Torin knelt beside her, speaking seriously. Do you know why I'm teaching you this? Because bad people exist and I should know how to protect myself? Partly. But also because you're braver than most warriors I've known. That courage should be paired with skill. He touched her cheek gently, a gesture that would have shocked anyone who remembered the cold Alpha King of 10 years ago. You ran through dangerous streets to save your family. You faced me in my war council without fear. You have a warrior's heart, little wolf. Arya beamed at the praise, then sobered. But I was really scared. When the bad men were hurting Mama and Elena, I was so scared I almost didn't run. Almost just hid. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting despite the fear. Torin's voice carried conviction born from decades of battle. True warriors feel fear and do what needs doing anyway. That's what makes them strong. Were you scared when you saved us? The question caught Torin off guard. Was he scared? He examined the memory of that night. The desperate ride, the cottage assault facing Vexus's men. Yes, he admitted. I was terrified I'd arrive too late. That I'd fail another family that needed protection. But you didn't fail. You saved us. Arya hugged him spontaneously as she often did. So the scary feelings were wrong. If only it were that simple, Torin thought. But he returned the embrace, letting this small child's uncomplicated affection chip away at his carefully constructed emotional armor. A cough announced Elena's approach. She stood at the training yard's edge, watching them with her characteristic wariness. Arya, Mama says it's time for your lessons with the tutors. But I'm learning archery. Arya protested. And you'll continue tomorrow, Torin promised. But education is equally important. Go on, little wolf. After Arya reluctantly departed, Elena approached, studying Torin with analytical precision. You're good with her. Patient in ways I wouldn't have expected. She reminds me of... Torin stopped himself, but Elena finished the thought. Your daughter. Mira told me about Sarah. Elena's voice softened slightly. I'm sorry for your loss. It was 10 years ago. Torin stood, busying himself collecting the practice arrows to avoid Elena's perceptive gaze. Grief doesn't follow schedules, especially when you never properly processed it. Elena's investigator instincts worked on people as well as documents. You sealed yourself off, became the cold ruler, thought isolation was strength. It kept me alive. Kept my kingdom secure. But the words sounded hollow even to Torin. Did it? Or did it just mean you survived without actually living? Elena challenged. My father used to say the difference between surviving and living is what you're willing to fight for. Survival is just avoiding death. Living is protecting something beyond yourself. The wisdom hit hard coming from someone so young, shaped by experiences that should never have touched someone her age. Torin met her eyes directly. Your father was right. And I'm grateful to all of you for forcing me to remember that. Elena's expression remained guarded, but something shifted minutely. We're grateful too. Even if I don't fully trust this yet, even if I keep waiting for the price to be revealed, I'm grateful. There's no price, Elena. Just a promise finally kept. Torin paused, then asked something that had concerned him for weeks. Are you happy here? This work, this position, is it what you want? Or are you doing it because you feel obligated? The question surprised her. I actually love it. The investigation, the justice-seeking, making corrupt people answer for their crimes. Feels important. Meaningful. She smiled slightly. Though I never imagined myself as anything other than a seamstress. Sometimes our lives take unexpected directions. Sometimes those directions lead somewhere better than we planned. Before Elena could respond, a messenger arrived at a full run, his face pale with urgency. Alpha King. Northern Border Patrol reports. Survivors from the Crimson Claw Pack. They're regrouping beyond our territory. The words froze Torin's blood. Crimson Claw. The pack he'd supposedly exterminated. The ones who'd murdered Lyanna and Sarah. Survivors meant witnesses to his vengeance. People with motivation for retaliation. How many? His voice went cold. The Wolf of Winter's tactical calculation reasserting itself. Unknown. But our scouts confirmed at least 20 warriors, possibly more. They're making alliances with displaced packs, building strength. Torin's mind raced through implications. The Crimson Claw remnants would want revenge. Would target anything he cared about. Would use the same tactics against him that he'd once used against them. Would target the Bennett family. The realization hit with sickening force. By bringing them close, by allowing himself to care, he'd painted targets on Mira, Elena, and especially Arya. His enemies would recognize his attachment, exploit it, use it to destroy him the way he'd been destroyed before. Double the palace guard. Put the border on high alert. I want full intelligence reports within 6 hours. Torin dismissed the messenger, then turned to Elena. I need to think. Alone. Elena saw the shutters coming down, watched him rebuilding walls that had been slowly crumbling. Torin, whatever you're thinking, go check on your mother and sister. Make sure they're safe. Please. The last word came out strained, almost desperate. That evening, Torin made his decision. He summoned Mira to his private study, the meeting formal and painful. I'm sending you away, he said without preamble. You, Elena and Arya. Anywhere in the kingdom you choose, with full support and protection, but away from the palace. Away from me. Mira studied him with her healer's insight. Because of the Crimson Claw survivors. They'll come for anyone I care about. It's their way. Destroy what the enemy loves before killing the enemy himself. Torin couldn't meet her eyes. I won't let you become targets because of my mistakes. This is the only way to keep you safe. Safe from external threats, perhaps. But what about safe from your own fear? Myra's voice was gentle but firm. You're doing exactly what you did 10 years ago. Isolating yourself, pushing away connection, believing that distance equals protection. It does. Lyanna and Sarah died because I cared too much to see the danger clearly. I won't make that mistake again. The mistake wasn't caring. Mira said quietly. The mistake was the traitor in your guard. The mistake was your enemy's cruelty. But not the love itself. Love wasn't your weakness, Torin. It was your strength. Before Torin could argue, Elena entered without knocking, Arya close behind. They'd obviously been listening. We're not going, Elena announced flatly. This isn't a negotiation. You're right. It's not. Elena's voice carried steel. You gave me authority as your investigator. I'm using it to investigate a threat to the kingdom, these Crimson Claw survivors. I can't do that from some distant safe house. Elena. And I just spent weeks building medical training programs, Mira added. Programs that will save lives. I'm not abandoning them because you're afraid. I'm not afraid, I'm being tactical. You're terrified, Arya said quietly, and the simple truth from a child's lips cut through all the rationalizations. You're scared like I was scared when the bad men came. But you told me courage means acting anyway. So act. Don't run. Torin looked at this family who'd somehow become his pack, who refused to be protected through isolation, who demanded he trust in connection rather than retreat into cold detachment. They could kill you, he said hoarsely. Use you against me. I can't lose anyone else. Then don't push us away before the battle even starts. Mira moved closer, placed her hand over his. We're Bennett women. We survived Vexus. We survived poverty and exploitation and violence. We're not fragile, Torin. We're pack. And pack fights together. Arya climbed into his lap, wrapping small arms around his neck. We're staying, Papa King. You can't make us go. We're pack now. Pack stays together. Torin's walls shattered. He pulled all three of them close. Myra's hands still on his, Elena standing firm beside him, Arya clinging with absolute trust. The Wolf of Winter finally accepted what his isolation had denied for a decade. He wasn't alone anymore. And maybe, just maybe, that made him stronger instead of weaker. All right, he whispered into Arya's hair. We stay together. We face this together. As pack. Outside his window, the kingdom settled into evening. Somewhere beyond the borders, enemies gathered. But inside the palace, a broken Alpha King began to understand that his greatest strength wasn't isolation. It was the family brave enough to stand beside him. 2 weeks of preparation transformed the Blackwood Kingdom into a fortress. Border patrols tripled. The palace guard rotated in unpredictable patterns. Torin personally reviewed every security protocol, searching for weaknesses that traitors might exploit. He wouldn't repeat history's mistakes. Then came the midnight assault. A border village burned, families slaughtered with Crimson Claw signature brutality, throats torn, bodies displayed as warnings. The village elder survived just long enough to gasp final words to the responding patrol. Message for the Alpha King. They're coming for the children he protects. The report reached Torin before dawn. He stood in his war room, studying maps with cold tactical precision, but his hands trembled slightly. The Crimson Claw wanted him to know. Wanted him afraid, off balance, making mistakes driven by emotion rather than strategy. It's a distraction, his second-in-command observed. Draw you out, strike where you're vulnerable. Obviously. Torin's voice was ice, but his wolf raged beneath the surface. Protective fury demanding he hunt these threats down personally. The question is whether we spring their trap deliberately or wait for them to escalate. The answer came within hours. A messenger arrived under peace banner, carrying a formal challenge. Raven, survivor and new leader of the Crimson Claw remnants, demanded parley. Neutral ground, ancient stone circle outside the capital, dawn tomorrow. Come alone or watch her forces burn villages until he complied. Every advisor urged refusal. Obvious trap, they said. Suicide, they warned. But Torin understood the game. Refuse and Raven would escalate against civilians. His reputation would suffer. Alpha King too afraid to face enemies directly. She'd engineered a situation where he had no tactical choice. I'm going, he announced. But not alone. The King's fangs deploy with me, standard formation. If it's a trap, we'll be ready. That evening, Torin made his rounds, securing the palace, reviewing defense plans, ensuring every contingency was covered. Then came the hardest part. Saying goodbye to the people who'd somehow become his reason for all this preparation. He found Mira in the medical wing, organizing supplies with characteristic efficiency. She looked up as he entered, reading his expression instantly. You're going to the parley tomorrow. I have to. Raven will keep killing innocents otherwise. Torin moved closer, struggling with words. If something happens, if this goes wrong, Elena knows where all the documents are. She can continue the corruption investigations. You'll have full kingdom support for your medical programs. And Arya. We'll need her Papa King to come home, Mira interrupted gently. So make sure you do. Don't say goodbye like you're not coming back. Say you'll see us tomorrow. The simple wisdom steadied him. I'll see you tomorrow. I promise. Elena was harder. He found her in the training yard, practicing sword forms he'd taught her with fierce concentration. She'd become genuinely skilled, not elite warrior level but competent enough to defend herself. Seeing her wield a blade with confidence made something tighten in his chest. I know about the parley, she said without stopping her practice. And before you give me some speech about staying safe, understand this. I've positioned loyal guards throughout the palace. Cross-referenced everyone against your files. If there's a traitor, I'll find them. Elena. I'm not helpless anymore, Torin. None of us are. We're pack. Which means we protect each other. She finally stopped, met his eyes directly. So go do what needs doing. We'll hold the palace. Just come back. I will. I promise. Arya was the hardest goodbye. He found her already asleep, curled up in the oversized bed of her new room, his fur cloak wrapped around her like a blanket. Torin stood watching her peaceful face, this small child who'd crashed into his life and shattered every wall he'd built. He knelt beside the bed, brushed blonde hair from her forehead with gentle fingers. I have to go away for a little while tomorrow, little wolf. But I'll come back. I always keep my promises to you. Arya's eyes fluttered open. Promise. Promise. Now sleep. Dream of good things. As she drifted back to sleep, Torin placed a small object on her nightstand. A carved wolf, wooden and simple, that had belonged to Sarah. The only possession of his daughters he'd kept. If he didn't return, at least Arya would have something to remember him by. Dawn came cold and gray. Torin rode out with 20 of his best warriors, the king's fangs in tight formation. The ancient stone circle appeared through morning mist, weathered monuments older than the kingdom itself, marking ground where no lord held authority. Raven waited with her own forces. She was smaller than Torin expected, scarred and lean, with eyes that burned with decade-old hatred. A she-wolf who'd survived his purge through sheer vicious determination. Alpha King Torin Blackwood. Her voice carried across the circle. Murderer of my pack. Butcher of the Crimson Claw. Did you enjoy your slaughter? Your pack murdered my mate and daughter, Torin replied coldly. They earned their fate. And the children? The elders? Those who'd committed no crime except sharing blood with warriors. Raven's smile was ugly. You killed everyone, Torin. Men, women, cubs. You exterminated us like vermin. The accusation hit harder than Torin wanted to admit. In his rage and grief, had he killed innocents? Had his justice become genocide? I did what was necessary to protect my kingdom, he said, but the words felt hollow. You did what grief-maddened monsters do. You lashed out blindly. Raven circled slowly. Now I'll teach you the same lesson. I'll take everything you love. Then when you're hollow and broken, I'll end you. You're here to negotiate or gloat? Torin's hand moved to his sword. Neither. I'm here to distract you. Raven's grin widened. While we talk, my forces are already inside your precious palace. Infiltrators posing as servants, positioned over weeks. Right now, they're moving on your new family, those Bennett women you care so much about. Horror crashed through Torin's tactical calm. You're lying. Am I? Tell me, Alpha King, did you personally verify every new servant hired in the past month? Or were you too busy playing father to a street child? Raven laughed. By the time you ride back, they'll be dead. Just like Lyanna. Just like Sarah. You'll return to corpses and understand what you took from me. Torin didn't wait. Didn't issue orders or maintain formation. He simply turned his horse and rode, hell-bent for the palace, abandoning tactical advantage for desperate speed. Behind him, his warriors engaged Raven's forces, buying him time with their lives. At the palace, Elena's instincts screamed warnings. Guards changing shifts wrong, servants in incorrect positions, subtle wrongness everywhere. She'd reviewed Torin's files obsessively, knew every legitimate staff member's face. Seal the Bennett quarters, she ordered the guards she trusted. No one enters without my direct authorization. But she was seconds too late. Fighting erupted in the corridors. Crimson Claw infiltrators revealing themselves, attacking with coordinated precision. They'd positioned themselves perfectly, cutting off access to the royal quarters where Mira and Arya sheltered. Elena fought like her father had trained her, like Torin had refined. Her sword took down 2 attackers, bought precious seconds. But there were too many pressing from all sides. Inside the royal chambers, Mira barricaded the door with furniture, preparing makeshift weapons from medical supplies, poison darts, sedatives, anything that could disable attackers. She'd survived poverty and abuse. She wouldn't fall to assassins. Arya watched her mother's preparations with wide eyes. Mama, I'm scared. I know, baby. But remember what Papa King taught you. Courage means acting despite fear. Mira pressed a small dagger into Arya's hands. If anyone gets through, you run. Use the secret passages Torin showed you. Get to the throne room, find loyal guards. Can you do that? Arya nodded, tears streaming but jaw set with determination. The door shattered. Crimson Claw warriors poured through. Mira fought with desperate fury. Poison darts dropped 3. A lucky strike with a medical blade took another. But numbers overwhelmed skill. They forced her back, cornered her. Arya didn't freeze. She ran, small and fast, slipping past the attackers focused on Mira. Into the secret passage Torin had shown her during their explorations. Running through darkness toward help, just like the night she'd run to save her family before. The 7-year-old navigated the passages from memory, emerged near the barracks. Found Captain Marcus, her assistant named for her father, with a group of loyal guards. They're attacking. Mama needs help. The bad wolves are hurting her. Arya's voice carried authority despite her tears. I know the secret way back. Follow me. Led by a child through passages she'd explored out of curiosity, the guards flanked the attackers. The tide turned. Crimson Claw warriors found themselves surrounded, outnumbered. But during the chaos, during those critical minutes when Arya was running for help, Mira took a blade meant for Elena. Jumped between her daughter and an attacker's strike. The sword pierced her chest, through ribs and into her heart. Elena's scream shattered something. She killed the attacker with vicious precision, then caught her mother as she fell. Mama, no, please. Elena's hands pressed uselessly against the wound. Too deep, too much blood, no way to stop it. Myra's eyes found her daughter's. Proud. So proud of you both. Blood on her lips. Tell Torin. Not his fault. Tell him, protect them. Mama, please stay with me. But Mira Bennett, who'd survived poverty and abuse, who'd saved an Alpha King and built a better life for her daughters, took her final breath in Elena's arms. Torin crashed into the palace to find the battle already won. Bodies littered the corridors, Crimson Claw attackers dead or captured. His warriors victorious. But the grief radiating from the royal quarters told him victory's cost. He found Elena holding Myra's body, covered in her mother's blood. Found Arya sobbing in a guard's arms, small and broken. Found the woman who'd saved his life twice lying dead because he'd brought them into his world of violence. Torin dropped to his knees beside them, reaching for Mira with shaking hands. No. Not again. Please, not again. She saved me, Elena whispered. Took the blade meant for me. Her last words. She said to tell you it wasn't your fault. To protect us. Arya wrenched free from the guard, threw herself into Torin's arms. Papa King, make her wake up. Please make Mama wake up. But even Alpha Kings couldn't command death. Torin held the sobbing child, met Elena's devastated eyes over Arya's blonde head, and felt his heart shatter all over again, grief and guilt and rage creating a wound that might never heal. Outside, Raven had escaped. The Crimson Claw's revenge was incomplete but devastating. And Alpha King Torin Blackwood understood that caring, protecting, loving, it all still led to the same terrible place. Loss. The kingdom mourned Mira Bennett with honors reserved for heroes. Her body lay in state in the Great Hall, surrounded by flowers from every corner of the realm, gifts from families she'd helped, soldiers she'd healed, people whose lives she'd touched with kindness and skill. Torin personally delivered the eulogy, his voice steady despite visible anguish. He spoke of the battlefield where Mira had saved his life, extracting an arrow that should have killed him. Of her wisdom that had helped him remember how to feel. Of her sacrifice protecting her daughter. Of a healer who'd saved her last patient with her final breath, because Elena, trained by Myra's courage, would carry that legacy forward. Elena stood stoic and breaking, her hand gripping Arya's tightly. The little girl barely comprehended her mother was truly gone, kept expecting Mira to walk through doors, to call them for dinner, to tuck her in at night. The burial took place in the royal cemetery, an honor Torin insisted on despite protest from traditional nobles. She saved the Alpha King's life twice, he'd said with finality. She earned this place beside warriors and queens. As earth covered the coffin, Elena's control finally shattered. She turned on Torin with grief-fueled fury. This is your fault. If we'd never met you, if you'd just ignored Arya that night, Mama would still be alive. Torin accepted the accusation without defense, his own guilt too overwhelming to argue. You're right. I brought this violence into your lives. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back. Elena's voice cracked. We were surviving before you. Poor but together. Now we have wealth and position and a dead mother. Was it worth it? No. The single word held universes of pain. Nothing is worth this. If you want to leave, take Arya, go anywhere, I'll ensure you're protected and supported. You don't have to stay in the world that killed her. But Arya pulled free from Elena's grip, positioned herself between them with fierce determination. Stop it. Both of you stop. The 7-year-old's voice carried surprising authority. Mama didn't die because of Papa King. She died protecting family. She told me when the bad wolves came, she said protecting the people you love is what makes life meaningful. Elena crouched to her sister's level. Sweetling, you don't understand. I do understand. Tears streamed down Arya's face, but her voice stayed strong. Mama was happy here. Happier than after Papa Marcus died. She told me Papa King gave her purpose again. That helping him made her feel alive. The words hit Elena like physical blows. She remembered her mother's smiles, genuine joy as she built medical training programs. Myra's contentment teaching healers, her satisfaction knowing her work would save countless lives. Her mother hadn't just been surviving in the palace, she'd been thriving. Don't be mad at Papa King, Arya continued. Mama wouldn't want that. She'd want us to stay together. To be pack. To keep fighting for good things. Elena's anger drained, leaving only shared grief. She looked at Torin, saw matching devastation in his eyes, recognized someone else who'd lost everything trying to protect what he loved. They broke down together. Not Alpha King and Investigator, but two protectors who'd both failed someone precious. Torin's arms came around both sisters and they mourned as the family they'd become. Imperfect, wounded, but bound by love strong enough to survive even this. Later, at Myra's grave when the crowds had dispersed, Torin made his vow. Elena and Arya stood beside him as witnesses. Mira Bennett saved my life twice. Once with medicine, once with wisdom. She taught me that isolation isn't strength, that caring for others gives purpose to power. His voice was rough but steady. I vow to honor her by protecting what she loved most, her daughters. By being the family she wanted you to have. He knelt before them formally. If you'll accept me, not as your king but as your pack, I will be the father you lost. I'll protect you, guide you, love you as my own. Not to replace Marcus or Mira, but to carry their legacy forward. Elena studied him through tears. Saw genuine love beneath the grief. Real commitment beyond obligation. Her mother had trusted this man. Maybe it was time she did too. Yes, she whispered. We accept. We're pack now. Arya threw herself into Torin's arms. We're family, Papa King. Real family. Forever. 3 months later, formal adoption papers were signed in a ceremony that transformed the kingdom's understanding of their Alpha King. Princess Elena Bennett Blackwood and Princess Arya Bennett Blackwood, not born royal but chosen family. Common girls elevated not through politics but through genuine love. The kingdom witnessed their Alpha King kneeling before 2 orphans, swearing oaths of protection and devotion with tears streaming unashamedly down his scarred face. Witnessed him place royal circlets on their heads and declare them his daughters before all witnesses. The ceremony ended with Arya's voice, clear and joyful despite lingering grief. Now we're really pack. Forever and ever. 6 months after Myra's death, the kingdom had transformed profoundly. The Fallen Warriors Protection Act ensured no family suffered as the Bennetts once had. Myra's medical training program graduated its first class of healers, common folk who'd never have had such opportunities before. Elena's corruption investigations had purged the kingdom's administration, creating systems of accountability that prevented future exploitation. The Crimson Claw threat had been eliminated, Raven hunted down and defeated, her remaining forces scattered or absorbed into the kingdom. But Torin had taken prisoners rather than executing everyone. had offered redemption to those willing to swear loyalty. His justice tempered by mercy, his strength enhanced rather than weakened by compassion. The palace gardens, where Torin's first family had died, had been reclaimed as a place of life. Flowers bloomed in carefully tended beds. Children played on the paths. The space honored the dead by celebrating the living. Torin found his daughters there one spring evening. Elena was reviewing investigation reports on a bench, while Arya practiced archery with focused determination, no longer the terrified child who'd run into his war council, but a confident young princess who moved through the palace with authority and grace. "Papa King." Arya spotted him, ran over for the customary hug. Now 8 years old, she'd grown but never lost her fearless affection. "Watch this. I hit the center 3 times today." "Impressive." Torin settled beside Elena, examined her reports. "Finding anything concerning?" "Minor infractions, nothing systemic. Your reforms are working." Elena's voice held satisfaction. "The kingdom's actually functioning justly." "Who knew that was possible?" "Your mother knew. She believed in better possibilities when I'd forgotten they existed." Torin looked at the gardens, at the life blooming where death had once reigned. "I think she'd be proud of what we've built." "She would be." Elena's hand found his. "And she'd tell you to stop carrying so much guilt. That you saved us more than we saved you." "I'm not sure that's mathematically accurate." "Math has nothing to do with it. Family isn't a ledger of debts and payments." Elena smiled. "It's just being there. Protecting each other. Growing together. You taught us that." Arya returned from shooting, plopped down between them. "Can we plant more flowers? Ones that Mama liked? I remember she loved the blue ones that smell sweet." "Forget-me-nots," Elena supplied. "Yes, we can plant those." Together they worked the earth, planting flowers in memory of the woman who'd brought them together, whose love had transformed an alpha king from isolated monster into genuine father. That night, Torin stood in his chambers looking at 2 portraits. His original family, Lyanna and Sarah, forever young and lost, and his new family, Elena and Arya, very much alive and present. He spoke to both. "I didn't forget you. I'll never forget. But I've learned I can honor your memory by protecting others. By being what you'd want me to be, strong enough to love even when it's terrifying." His wolf, silent for so long after losing Lyanna and Sarah, purred contentment. Pack safe. Pack thriving. Purpose fulfilled. In the final analysis, the story that began with a desperate child's plea to a ruthless king had transformed into something far more profound. It proved that even the hardest heart could thaw when given the right reason. That strength without compassion was just cruelty with better weapons. That the most feared wolf in the kingdom could become the gentlest father when a 7-year-old girl was brave enough to ask for help. Alpha King Torin Blackwood ruled for 40 more years, always with his daughters by his side. Elena as his chief investigator and eventual successor, Arya as his diplomat and keeper of his conscience. Together they built a kingdom remembered not for conquest but for justice. Not for fear but for the fierce protective love that transformed subjects into citizens, and a ruler into a true leader. The kingdom never forgot the night a bloodstained child ran into a war council and changed everything. They told the story for generations. How the wolf of winter's frozen heart was melted by a little girl's courage, how true strength was found not in isolation but in the bravery to care, to protect, to love even when every instinct screamed that caring only led to loss. Because Arya Bennett Blackwood, who'd run through dangerous streets to save her family, had taught the most feared man in the realm the greatest truth, that family pack was worth any risk, any pain, any sacrifice. And that legacy of love over fear, connection over isolation, became the foundation on which a kingdom was transformed and a broken man was finally, completely healed.